All right, so now we have step 5, and that is to verify your seller account if you haven't done so already, and to estimate your cost. So what I mean by cost, this will be your overall profit margin is what we're trying to figure out. That way we can compare all of our quotes that we received from our 1 to 3 suppliers or more. So let's get started with verifying the seller account in case you're still going through that process or if you still have some questions around it. So by now you should have either one of these scenarios should have happened. You should have received a postcard in the mail to your address, and you've went to your settings, your account info, and you typed in that unique code. This is the older way of doing it. I don't think Amazon actually does this anymore, but I wanted to throw this in here just in case it applied to your scenario. You could have either completed an online interview with Amazon and an associate at this point, or I would recommend that you do that very soon. Third, make sure the deposit and charge methods are accurate and not expired. This is the second most common reason why new sellers end up getting their account verified and then it ultimately gets revoked or suspended. And that's because your deposit or your charge method, being your credit card, has expired, or maybe it was only good for a certain time period. So just make sure that's up to date. And I'll also show you here in a second where you can update that in your settings. The last one here is to upload proof of address document. This is typically your bank statement, and it has to be within the previous 180 days. So let's talk about some issues with that. As I just mentioned, a lot of your documents, your proof of address document or your bank statement, has to be within the past 6 months or 180 days. The name on the account has to match the seller name on the account and your ID. So let's just say you're 19 years old and you're trying to create your Seller Central account and you live at a different address than your parents. They will send, if you put your parents' address on there and not your permanent address, they will send all the documents and address verification stuff to your parents' address. If that doesn't match what's on your ID, then you're going to have some trouble. So just make sure all of that matches your name and your address to your ID. And then lastly, the bank name is not shown on your documents. Just make sure it's credible, shows your bank name and address if applicable. All right, and then something else to note. This is one of the most common reasons why people end up getting, as I mentioned before, suspended in their account. It's nothing to be alarmed about, and this happens to just about every beginner seller. So if you do not make a sale within 60 to 90 days from opening the account, which most of us won't, or we might be at the tail end of that 90-day spectrum, we have to make sure that we go ahead and we re-verify our ID and or any necessary information that Amazon requests from us. So I'll share with you now how you can go ahead and just check on your account status. You can always see it here where it says account healthy, so that means I'm verified. The second thing to do is go to settings, account info, and then at the top here, you should receive a banner message saying update your bank account information, or you are inactive to sell in the US marketplace because of XYZ. And typically it's because of the payment information, which all you have to do is click here, payment information. And in addition to this, just one last thing on this topic. You should have always received an email whether or not your account is verified or suspended. Amazon does a great job of notifying you, and they also provide a hyperlink that you can click to go directly to the area that you need to update. So at this stage, the reason why we want everything to be up to date is because we need to start using some of the tools within Seller Central. The revenue calculator is what we'll be using today, and that calculator will allow us to understand what our total cost is going to be, our total profit at the end of the day, and then also our profit margin in the most accurate way possible. All right, so let's get started with that, and let's begin to estimate our cost. So in my scenario, I have my golf head cover, and I reached out to 3 different suppliers here. These are the same 3 suppliers that I mentioned in the previous module of our course, and this is after the first round of negotiation. As I mentioned before, I did go ahead, I asked for half the units that I wanted, and then I went back a second time and said, actually, I'll order 300 units. Can you give me a better rate? So this is after that stage. So I separate everything in here, and I'll also download this and put it in the resources for you to use, and you can use this exact same method. This is just a great way to compare and analyze the 3 different suppliers and their quotes. I made sure that this was consistent between the shipping Incoterm of DDP, as we mentioned previously, and the transit method was air shipping, not sea shipping. If you are shipping a larger product, you will typically have to resort to sea freight just because it's substantially cheaper. And although it's, it'll add maybe 1 to 3 weeks on top of what air can do, it's that saving that money is really going to help you profit at the end of the day. All right, so the number of units, as I mentioned, was 300 for every supplier. And then here's where we begin to see our differences. So we'll look at these 3 rows here. The base cost per unit, this is what we're seeing on the listing itself. So if I go ahead and click this first listing, we can see this is the base cost. This does not include any customization that you plan to do, such as adding your logo to the product or customizing unique packaging just for your brand. It also doesn't include any shipping. So those are going to be the three different elements that add up to your total cost. Head back here. So the base cost, as we can see, there was a substantial amount of variation. For this first supplier, we have $5.10 per unit. Second, $4.24 per unit. And then the third one, which looked great, right? If you go to their listing, $2.90. And I would say the quality of these products are all the same, so I'm not going to put a row in for that. So I'm probably wondering at this point, if I just looked at it, why is this the third supplier so much cheaper? We'll get back to that here in a second. Next, the row was for customization cost per unit. I told the supplier that I wanted this specific type of material, which is the white with the plaid look. And in addition to that, I wanted my logo at the top, which was the Whiskey Cigar logo, and I wanted my brand name at the bottom. So that included customization that was on top of the base cost, 55 cents for the first supplier, 90 cents for the second, and 60 cents. These should all be in the same ballpark. The base cost will vary, but the customization should be very similar. Now here's where things tend to get interesting. So you'll notice most of the time your shipping per individual unit, per 300 units, is going to be close to your base cost. And the reason why is because suppliers tend to hide this fee until the very end because they want to advertise a very cheap and inexpensive Alibaba base cost. So more customers reach out to them, and then they can add in some costs for the shipping. So we're seeing $3.25 for air freight for the first supplier, $3.10 for the second supplier, and then $4.60 for the third supplier. Now that is why, at least I believe, this third supplier had such a small base rate, is because they added in some of that cost into the shipping. If you ever want to receive a more inexpensive shipping quote, you can do this yourself. You don't have to rely on the supplier to go ahead and to order or handle the shipping and logistic process for you. You can go directly to DHL. You can give them the pickup address, which is your supplier's address, and you can order that separately. Now for you, since you're a beginner seller, more than likely, I would recommend to go with a supplier just for at least the first time until you get your feet wet, and then you can go ahead next time around and to save a little bit of money and organize the shipping yourself. All right, so this bottom line, this is the COGS, or cost of goods sold. That is the total cost per unit, and that essentially means what does it cost me and my business to get my product manufactured and shipped to the final destination, which is going to be our house in this scenario. So this is what we're comparing. This is our apples to apples comparison. For the first supplier, $8.90 per unit, $8.24 for the second supplier, and $8.10 for the third supplier. So what I have down here is the total cost. All I simply did is multiply the cost of goods sold by the number of units that I was ordering. So this is the total amount that was on those quotes from the supplier. Now we need to figure out two very important items here that will determine what our overall profit will be. First is, what are we going to list this at on Amazon? In other words, what is our sales price? I'll show you a quick way of doing this, and this is, I wouldn't say it's going to be the final price that we'll end up using because we'll put some more data into it and I'll show you a more concrete way of doing it. But for this step one, first round of negotiations, I'll show you how I came up with this $29.99. So it's very simple, at least the way that I've always done it. Go to Amazon and then type in what your product is. In other words, what is your product niche? Type that in. For me, it's the golf head cover. Okay, and then I'm going to use the Jungle Scout Chrome extension. So I'll click that, and it's going to populate all these metrics for this first listing page, which is roughly about the first 48 to 60 different listings. And we can actually see that here, 61 products. So it's pretty close. The easiest way of doing this is to take the average price and then make sure that your sales price is within plus minus 10% of that. I typically resort to going a little bit higher at this stage, and we can always refine it later on. So that is how I came up with the $29.99, which is roughly 10% more than the average price. The reason why I'm comfortable at this stage adding that 10% versus subtracting it is because a lot of these first page listings, they're not the same thing that I'm selling. It's not a driver head cover single unit. As you can see, this one is iron head covers, and that's going into the data and the metrics. This one, they're selling 3 different ones. And this one has fabric that is not of the high quality that I plan on using, which is leather and a polyester. So that is why I tend to add it, because if you're selling a product that should be better in terms of quality and dependability and durability, then it shouldn't be an issue increasing that by 10% roughly. So that's how I came up with the $29.99. I'm comfortable at this stage to use that. And now we have to figure out, what is our profit margin? If you don't know what profit margin means, this is the percentage of your revenue that you keep after all fees are included. So that includes our Amazon FBA fee, our referral fee, which I'm about to share with you, our cost of goods sold, any account fees, advertising fees. We should add that all into here to get an accurate representation of what we can expect. Now, our goal here, which I'll add in here, is we want this to be 35% or higher, meaning we keep $3.50 for every $10 that we generate for our business. This is a somewhat arbitrary number. This is what I've used for my business, but this gives you enough profit for any miscellaneous expenses or advertising and marketing fees, which will be included, and then still enough take-home pay for you to make this worthwhile, because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. We're creating a business. We want it to be profitable. Okay, I have this link in the resources, which you'll be able to go directly to. Otherwise, just type in revenue calculator up here, and you can click this and it'll take you directly to this area. So what we'll use this for is we'll use it to estimate our total cost for our product and our fees, and then it should provide us with the profit margin. So there's 3 ways of getting started here. I'll show you the easiest way, and then if you have some additional information, you can go ahead and provide a more accurate calculation. So the first one is to use the Amazon catalog to look up the product. So again, we just type in golf head cover here and click search. And this will search for it'll search for the products that you have, which is not listed yet, and then it'll search for other products. So these are the top listings in my niche right now. And so I want to select one that is nearly identical to what I'm selling, as far as the quantity that I'm also selling, and also roughly the same dimensions. And we're just using this to figure out what the product dimensions will be, as well as our fees. So this TaylorMade golf head cover, which is a larger brand name, but this is the same size, the driver head cover, and they're selling single unit, which is what I'm going to do. So I would go ahead and click select. Now it's going to import all of their information as far as the product dimensions, how much the product weighs, which goes into the FBA and storage fees. The other way of doing this is to actually define what our product is. So if your supplier provided you with the package dimensions, which is the package that it's in, not necessarily the item dimensions, you can go ahead and type that in. You can say, all right, yeah, it's 2 inches by 5 inches by 12. And then we know it's half a pound. So you can type all this information in. The other ones we want to add here is the product category. So this is going to be sports and outdoors. Item price is your sales price, $29.99. And then shipping charge, this is just for sellers that are using FBM or MFN, those who are shipping directly to the customer. So this is what you would charge the customer. Just put $0 because it's not going to apply in our scenario with FBA. Then you can click estimate. All right, so those are 2 different ways. The other way is to estimate in bulk, which I wouldn't recommend doing unless you're selling 30 different variations, or if you're selling clothing. So I'm not even going to show you that. So we'll go back here. We'll do the easy method, because I think this is great just for what we're trying to accomplish and to compare our different quotes. We'll go here to this section down through the middle, and then what I want you to do, just for simplicity's sake, remove the year fulfillment by clicking this X. That just removes the comparison chart and comparison calculation for MFN or FBM sellers. We want to focus on Amazon fulfillment, which I'll bring up in the middle. All right, so let's add in some information. Then you can see down here our net profit and our net margin will end up adjusting as we enter in the information for our product. So item price, this is going to be $29.99. And then let's discuss these fees. I know I've been discussing this for a while with you of that these are coming, and let me explain them so you understand why you're being charged per unit. Okay, so the first one are Amazon fees. This is known primarily as your referral fee, and this is roughly 15% of your sales price. So if we take $29.99 and multiply it by 15%, we get $4 and round it up to 50 cents. That's what they have here. Some other categories, like watches and jewelry, they may have a different percentage, but it's a fixed percentage that Amazon charges you per your sales price or revenue, and they do that just for using their platform. So it's really a commission saying, hey, here's the 15% off the top for letting me use Amazon.com. Another charge you may see is the fixed closing fee. This will probably be 99 cents, and this is because we have the individual selling plan type where they charge us an additional 99 cents per sale. This will end up being removed at the end of the day, and the reason why it's not shown here is because this test account I'm using is actually a professional selling plan type. So just know that this will end up being removed, but we'll keep it here because we really can't change it. These bottom two should be $0 as well. And then we have fulfillment cost. This is better known as our FBA fee. So this is $6.31 per sale. And this is a cost for Amazon to handle the fulfillment process for your product, meaning that they are going to take it out of storage, they're going to package it up with their cardboard packaging, and then the cost for them to actually ship it to each and every customer. Somewhere in this fee as well, there's also the customer service, but just know that this is your FBA fee. And for small products, this should range from about $4 to I'd say about $8. For larger products, this could go from anywhere from $8 and onward. It is based on the weight and the dimensions of your product. If you see that this is $30 or $40 or something way beyond your sales price, that means there's probably an issue with your package dimensions and or your unit weight. So always double check those if something looks a little bit off. Okay, don't worry about the service add-ons because that's all included in the FBA fee. And then we have our storage cost. So there's a percentage fee based on the dimensions and square footage of your product just sitting on Amazon. And it also depends if it's Q1 through 3 or Q4 of each year. As you can see, if I click October to December, which is holiday season, this will increase by nearly 2.7 times. So it's very important that you strategically store your inventory properly during the Q4 season, and it's not as expensive January through September. So for the majority of the year, it's going to be January through September, so we'll keep that. Just make sure you select the time period where your products will be stored at Amazon during the first month. Next, we have to type in the average inventory units stored. This is the total number of units that we'll store at Amazon. This should be equivalent to the number of units that you're procuring from your supplier. So for us, that's 300. And it's very important that we estimate the monthly units sold. I think a fair way of doing this is just to take 1/3. So for us, that'd be 100. But if you're expecting great numbers early on, you can always adjust this to what is more reasonable and realistic for you. I'm going to put 100 here, and then we'll scroll down to the inbounding cost, which was effective as of March this year. So as sellers, we have had a big problem with this cost because it's an additional cost. And in Amazon's defense, they're saying, hey, it's more expensive to process all these products. In addition, we're going to reduce the FBA fees about 5%. So technically, they say that it should just be a slight increase, but it's just annoying now because anytime we ship units to Amazon, we have to pay a couple, 25 to 50 cents per unit just to ship them. And that's in addition to the cost to ship them to Amazon. But with that being said, it's still a profitable business model, and we're going to be able to make this all work. So what you want to put for units to inbound, this is the number of units that you're procuring from your manufacturer and supplier. So that'd be 300. And here's where we can save some money. So how are we going to ship these to Amazon? Do we want to ship them to one location, or do we want to ship them partial shipments, or maybe ship them 4 or more boxes? For you as a beginner Amazon seller, I would do minimal shipment splits, because if we did partial, you could be shipping 2 or 3 or even more boxes separately to different locations. And the more times that you have more locations to ship to and multiple boxes, more things can go wrong. So in the future, you can use these optimized shipment splits to ship to different directions and to save a lot of money down here. But for the first time around, let's go ahead and do minimal shipment splits. So this means we're shipping to one location. And then what I want you to do is to play around with the inbound region. Now, this is basing where the packages are being shipped from. Ultimately, you will ship to the West Coast if you're shipping directly from China. So you need to think, what region of the United States are you in? Are you the west side of the United States, central, or east? I'm in the East Coast, so this is going to be the cheapest for me because I'll be receiving these products from overseas, and I'm shipping from my business location on the East Coast to hopefully a fulfillment center nearby. If we select the West and we ship out West, those are going to be additional processing fees because it's just out of the way for our business, and also for Amazon, it's not as efficient. So what I want you to do is to play around with this. The West Coast is $147, and this is total. Central is $114. East is $81. So always go with the cheapest option, which should be the geographical location in which you're located in the United States. All right, so we can see here it adds about 27 cents per unit just to process them for their facility. And then we can do the estimated shipping cost per shipment. Now, this is how much it will cost you to ship for us, the 300 units from our location to Amazon. Fortunately, if you use UPS and go through Amazon shipment workflow, which I'll show you later on, this is actually really inexpensive. So to ship about 300 units, I would estimate this to be about $18, and that is total shipment, not per unit. So I'll type in 18 there, and then we know our shipping cost per unit is 6 cents, 18 divided by 300. All right, I promise you we're almost done. I know this is a lot just for a calculation. So we have the other cost here. This is stuff that is really just pertains to our business. This includes our miscellaneous cost and our cost of goods sold. So miscellaneous cost, I'm going to leave this at 0 for now, but you can put a per unit amount that you may allocate for advertising in here if you want. I tend to look at that later on and to budget for that separately, but you're welcome to do that if you want. Next is cost of goods sold. We'll head back to the spreadsheet here. Let's do this for the first one, which was $8.90. Type in that. And then we can go down here to our estimated sales. Remember, we said we were going to sell 1/3 of that, which is 100. And we can see our first calculation of what this first supplier, what they're presenting us. So they're presenting us with an opportunity to have a net profit estimated over 30 days of close to $1,000 and an overall net margin of 31.64%. So let's go back here. We'll add this in and we'll round it up, 32%. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the second and third supplier. I'm going to run those calculations again and then enter the profit margin. And all you have to do is you just have to go to the cost of goods sold, because that's the only thing that's changing amongst the suppliers, and just change the cost of goods sold and then write down your net margin. Okay, so I typed those in, and it looks like we can eliminate the first supplier just because they have a much lesser profit margin. So I'd probably at this point go ahead, give them the X, and I'd look at the second and third. We have the same margin, roughly the same cost. We're talking plus minus 1%, 2% maximum. So these are two suppliers that I would go back to at this point in step 2. And I'd say, hey, I'm working with this other supplier, and make sure you don't name names, but you can tell them I received a quote that's more competitive. I'm going to give you one more chance to bring down this base cost, customization, or shipping per unit so I can achieve a higher margin. Otherwise, this does not meet my criteria of plus 35%. So let's go ahead, let's reach out to the suppliers again and give them one last chance to come down to a lower cost. All right, so I gave each supplier, all 3 of these suppliers, one last chance to come down, and I was successful with 2 out of 3. So for the first supplier, I mentioned earlier before this that we could probably eliminate them, but I said, we can actually, let's give them one more chance. It doesn't hurt to ask. And it did come down about 10 cents for the shipping per unit. And the second supplier did the same thing, but I think they came down from $3.10 per unit to $2.90, which really helped our profit margin come up to 35%. The third supplier said that was their best offer and they weren't willing to come down more unless we were willing to purchase more units or change the transit method or Incoterms, which I wasn't willing to do. So at this point, check out your profit margin, and this should give you a good idea financially which is the best decision. Now, ultimately, you want to weigh the financial costs for your investment in addition to the quality of all your suppliers that you're taking a look at. As I mentioned previously, all 3 of these had roughly the equivalent product and manufacturing capabilities. I was happy with all 3, so I wouldn't say that one supplier really stood out from the others. If I had to choose, I would go with the second one because of the financial reason, but also they've been around. If we go to a listing, they've been around for 11 years on Alibaba. I think, from my experience working with multiple manufacturers, if you are working with a supplier that's been around for over a decade, they are a great custom manufacturer and they are one that can be very well trusted. It also means, they've been on this for 11 years. They are successful with their product. It's a quality product and they have repeat customers. Okay, so the last thing I want to mention, because at this point you should have a good idea of which supplier you want to work with, I want to mention the step 3, which is going to be the opportunity. As we can see here, we see a great decrease in unit-based cost if we order more than 1,000 pieces. So what I want you to do is to take that one supplier and then also look at your unit-based costs if you were to increase to their MOQ to get their lowest rate. And if it's not displayed, ask them, hey, if I were to order 1,000 pieces or 2,000 pieces, what is the unit cost going to be for that? And the reason why we want to check this out, at least at this point, at this stage, is to at least understand, in the future, say this product becomes very successful and we are more willing to spend more on our product and to invest in more inventory because now we're selling more every single week. That is why you want to understand this, because this is going to be the best case scenario. So what I did here is I adjusted the total units up to 1,000 units. The base cost comes down to that $2.98, and then the shipping per unit was roughly $1.45, at least from what I estimated. You can ask them what this would be, or you can simply take about 40 to 50% of the previous shipping cost per unit, and that should give you a rough idea since you're shipping more. So let's go ahead and let's analyze this profit margin. So at a total cost of goods sold of $5.33, you can see we're going to be increasing our margin quite a bit. So in the best case scenario, we're looking at about a 44% profit margin, which I'll go ahead and I'll add that in here. Okay, so with this supplier and our final investment, we can expect between a 35 to 44% profit margin. So for you, just understand that this profit margin should be above 35% ideally. And if not, then we have to kind of repeat this process over again or find a new supplier. This is the unfortunate part that you'll probably run into, and I run into with every single product, is that sometimes you're just not able to meet that 35% profit margin. Do not be over optimistic and just to assume, it's 30% now, 25%. I'll be able to make it work down the line. Trust me, I've never taught somebody out of over 500 students over the past 4 to 5 years that has been able to turn their low profit margin into a higher profit margin just for the sake of hope. And at this stage, if you're not able to achieve that with any of your suppliers, go back to the drawing board and find a supplier that can make it work. And it's also not a terrible thing to go back to step 3, start product research over again, and find a better product niche and a better product opportunity to sell.